Iraq War veteran Mario Marquez still carries the hardship and memories of his 4 deployments to the Middle East with the Marine Corps between 2002 and 2009. But he doesn't understand why America still holds on to its military authorities to wage war there, more than a decade after the fighting has officially stopped.
Millions of servicemen and women answered a call to serve in Iraq willingly and without question, and we did so without ever knowing a definitive end to our service. However, our force is not built to remain in a perpetual state of war.
Lawmakers took their first real steps in addressing that issue this week, voting to advance plans repealing the authorization for use of military force it gave to former President George W. Bush 20 years ago, before the start of the Second Gulf War. It's the first significant movement on the issue in years, and it comes just days after the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion into Iraq. More than 4,500 U.S. service members died there in the following decades. The authorization has been used for a host of military actions, some of them not directly connected to Iraq. Critics have been pushing for years to repeal the language, calling it outdated and troublesome.
We have the chance to repeal the 1991 and 2002 AUMFs and honor the legacy of those who fought and those we lost. To end a war we are no longer waging. To exercise Congress's war powers, the most solemn duty of this body. Because Saddam Hussein has been dead for 20 years and his regime is gone. Because the Iraq of 2023 is obviously not the Iraq of 2003. Because Kuwait has been a secure, sovereign, and committed U.S. partner for over 3 decades. And because the threats that these authorizations address no longer exist. The United States is no longer an occupying force. Iraq is now a strategic partner. It is time to confront the challenges of the region and of the world together.
Recently, members of the American Legion joined bill sponsors Tim Kaine and Todd Young in a rally near the Senate steps to push for action on the issue.
One of the features of military service among this generation of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen and women, guardians, is multiple deployments. That multiple deployments into a war zone, that was something that we didn't necessarily see so much before, but the 4, 5, 6, 7 deployment veterans is not that unusual in Virginia or anywhere. They served again and again and again, and yet so often there's been a Congress, and this is a bipartisan comment, where Congresses of both parties, under presidents of both parties, have been unwilling to exercise the Article I responsibility for looking at matters of war, peace, and diplomacy, because it's tough politics. A war vote is the hardest one you'll ever make. Could go wrong. So what Congresses have tended to do is defer and abdicate an Article I responsibility to the president, support the president when it works out well, when it doesn't, how dare you. But it's time for Congress to shoulder this obligation, and I think both Senator Young and I view having a vote like this on these outdated authorizations as Congress beginning to take back and occupy a little bit of that Article I responsibility.
Most of my constituents are unaware. They had absolutely no idea that these legal authorities were still on the books after all these years. It seems intuitive to most Americans that we would repeal the authorizations when they were no longer needed.
The White House issued a statement earlier this month endorsing the Kaine-Young repeal, noting that it would not affect the 2,500 U.S. troops currently stationed in Iraq. Those troops are instead stationed there to fight Islamic State forces under a separate 2001 military authorization, which Congress passed in the wake of the 9/11 attacks to target al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But not everyone is on board with this recent repeal plan. Some conservative lawmakers in the House have opposed similar efforts in the past, and Republican leaders in the House have not yet committed to bringing up the new Senate language for debate in their chamber. Still, supporters say the legislative movement in the Senate represents important progress on the issue. And they hope the discussion reminds Americans about the struggles and sacrifices of the troops who fought overseas, some of whom are still living with the scars of war today. For Military Times, I'm Leo Shane.